All right. Welcome to the Edlow Podcast. Hello, Sean Kanan.
Hey, brother, how are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you for being willing to come on. I know you're a very busy man between writing books and being part of Cobra Kai and being Deacon Sharpe and the karate bad boy Mike Barnes. You're insanely busy. So I appreciate you being able to take a little bit of time and talk to me about your views on just motivation, mindset, success, failure. So I really appreciate that.
It's my pleasure. I love doing it.
Good. One thing I just have to ask, because I was looking up your bio and I noticed something. You have a political science degree.
I do, from UCLA, yes.
So I'm a political science major from Sac State. Just curious, was there a reason you went and did that?
Well, the deal was that I could, come out and pursue my career in acting, but I had to finish college. That was the deal with my parents.
Right.
I was going to school at Boston University, and I was 2 years into my poli-sci degree, and I knew I needed to either move to California or New York to start acting, and I figured it'd be easier to be broke where the sun was shining. And I got into UCLA, which my father is still convinced that I have naked pictures of the dean with a goat or something. But I got in, and I finished my poli-sci degree, and I love politics. I love international relations, all that sort of stuff. So I figured it wasn't a plan B for me, but I needed to do something to kind of placate my parents. And I figured, okay, if I don't make it as an actor, I guess I can always try and go to law school, and political science is a pretty good undergrad degree to enter into law school.
Yeah, that's what I did. I'm an attorney. I'm a trial attorney here in Sacramento, California. Yeah, and I got the political science degree because that's what everybody did. And it's interesting because the political science degree at Sac State, it allows for a lot of open credits for electives. And being an attorney, I actually took a ton. I knew I wanted to try cases. And
acting class?
I took a bunch of acting classes.
Yeah.
And I had a great time doing it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. What I love about the political science degree is that you learn a lot just about the process. And boy, we're in a really fascinating political time. So I'm really glad I had that training so I can watch this kind of play out. It's been fun.
I completely agree.
Yeah. So, let's start from the beginning. You talk about, first of all, let's talk about your book. So I picked up Way of the Cobra, and I've been reading it and I love it. I've already pre-ordered. Well, I think it's available now. Welcome to the Kumite, which is the follow-up.
Welcome to the Kumite.
Yeah, there you go. And really interesting. You bring up the story of how you came to be Mike Barnes,
right,
and how you just had a mindset walking in. I remember you reading and saying 1,500 people are trying to become Mike Barnes, and you're relatively unknown. New in your acting career.
I was unknown. That wasn't relatively unknown. I was unknown.
Right. And you talk a lot about, you just had the mindset that role was yours. You were telling people at home, I'm going to be in Karate Kid 3.
I know the hubris of ignorance in youth, I think, but it was also, I was in a state, in a mindset where I had mentally convinced myself that I couldn't fail. And so a lot of times in life, when I'm facing stuff that's a challenge, I try and key back into what was it about that period of time in my life, that specific moment in time in my life that put me into a mind frame where not succeeding wasn't a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you bring that up. I have a similar story when it comes to becoming an attorney. I come from a background that, there's not a lot of, my parents were very supportive, but not a lot of financial backing. I remember telling a friend of mine, I was thinking about going to law school while I was at community college.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, he just said to me, I'd bet everything I own on you not making it. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, a lot of people would have taken that and not done anything with it.
Well, I think it's a side note too. That's with friends like that, who needs enemies? I mean,
Right.
you really do need to surround yourself with people that are invested in your success, as you should be invested in their success as their friend.
Yeah.
I actually talk a lot about that in Welcome to the Kumite, that as you begin to shine in life, one of the byproducts is that you will find that a lot of quote unquote friends, the reflection of your shining shines a light on them, and oftentimes illuminates all of the things that they're not doing in their life, and
Mm,
they begin to behave in a way that is very much like a frenemy. And
mm,
because it's like you're holding up a mirror to their I don't want to say shortcomings, but their either inability to take action, or whatever stories they're telling themselves. And so you may find yourself in a place where longtime quote unquote friends no longer are around. But the good news is that as you continue to ascend and shine and succeed, you'll attract new friends, and you'll attract better friends, and they'll be seeing you living your best life, your authentic self, your best life, and you're really showing them who you are. And you'll be in a place where you'll decide that if you give your friendship, that it's a gift, that it's something that you don't just bestow on everybody. And so your circle might shrink a little bit, but it'll be a lot more it'll be a much more secure circle.
yeah. No, that's interesting. But I like what you said earlier. And you said, I heard Rob Lowe one time say, when he was acting, he said, it just never occurred to me that I couldn't make it,
Well, I mean,
and
think about how crazy and to a certain degree arrogant you have to be. I was this kid from a small town in Western Pennsylvania, and thinking I was going to come out to Hollywood and set the world on fire. But the fact of the matter is, if I didn't believe it, who the hell else was going to believe it?
right.
You know, how
100%.
could I convince someone else that I was worth, sitting in a dark movie theater for 2 hours to watch me on the big screen, if I didn't believe it myself? So you have to cultivate, that positive mindset, or your chances of succeeding are greatly diminished.
I 100% agree. And I got to imagine you're right. It takes a little bit of arrogance. You talk about walking into that hangar and approaching Ralph Macchio and them telling you, I believe was it John Avildsen himself who
Yes.
asked you to intimidate?
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, you got the guy who directed Rocky, which as a kid, my favorite franchises are Rocky and the Karate Kid. So you're standing there, with him, and he's telling you to intimidate Ralph Macchio. I mean, talk about that. Like, what talk about the mindset.
Let me go back and tell you something that happened about probably about 4 days before Cobra Kai came out. I was on the set of Bold and the Beautiful, and I was doing an interview with Entertainment Tonight. And I said to the guy interviewing me, he didn't know this, and I said, "You don't know this, but when I was in the process of auditioning for Karate Kid 3, Entertainment Tonight was there." Because this whole thing was like a publicity stunt. I mean, to think that you're really going to find, one of the lead actors in the third installment of a successful worldwide franchise, it's just not how you go about doing it from an open call. So anyway, Entertainment Tonight was there, and I said, they interviewed me, and he said, wow. He said, we've got a pretty vast vault, and he said, we'll find it. And I said, okay, I didn't know if they would. Well, you can go on YouTube, and you can actually see the conversation I was having with John Avildsen as a 22-year-old kid. My voice is different. And then you could see Entertainment Tonight. They asked me about myself and asked me to do some martial arts. And what was great about that was I hadn't seen that in 30 some years. And so, I've carried in my head a story about what that day was like. And then I had the opportunity decades later to see what it really like. And my recollection matched up pretty closely. But if anyone who's reading Way of the Cobra or is just interested wants to see, just Google, Sean Kanan Entertainment Tonight interview, and they cut together all the, the interview footage that they had from, 30 some years ago.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, a fan question that came through was, do you have a favorite experience from filming Karate Kid 3?
Karate Kid 3 was a very emotionally difficult film for me. Obviously there's the story about how I almost lost my life filming it. I had a myriad of different emotions that I encountered while filming it. Probably my favorite was filming. Well, my first favorite was when I got the role, because
Right.
I didn't get it at first. They hired someone else. Then they called me back to the studio, and I found out I got it, and that was probably, to date, one of the most euphoric moments I've ever experienced in my life. Just surreal is the only word that I can use to describe it. Filming the All Valley tournament, having seen it as a guy that bought a ticket to see the Karate Kid, and then suddenly there I am, I'm the guy fighting the Karate Kid. That
Right.
was a lot of fun. I don't think the producers, they didn't know whether or not I was going to be able to pull it off at the end. And they said to me, listen, just ad lib, go for it. And so I would say about 98% of what I did, aside from, the choreographed martial arts, was me ad libbing. And to have that freedom to finally feel like I could just go for it, was an amazing feeling. And again, euphoric. And, we had several hundred extras there. And I mean, it was amazing. And there were 8 cameras or 10 cameras rolling. So, I didn't even have to worry about, are they going to see what I'm doing? Because a lot of times, are they, the camera is on someone else's coverage. Sometimes the camera doesn't catch what you're doing. And I just knew no matter what I did, they were going to have it. And so that really freed me up to have fun, to just go for it and be Mike Barnes.
That's where did that go in the filming? Was that done at the end, or had you already gone through everything else?
It was pretty much at the end. And I had just come back from almost dying from my surgery. I had lost 25 pounds. I mean, I still had a wound on my abdomen that hadn't healed, and I always say it's a good thing that I wore a black gi, because I was bleeding from the wound while we filmed it. And it was far and away it was the most difficult scene, just because of the physicality to it. I think it was the final scene.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because that story was so impressive. I would describe it as almost like a David Goggins style mindset, where, I mean, I read about this in your book, and I was like, wow, I couldn't imagine being in that spot. You have a torn, what did they call it? It was on your leg, right?
I perforated my omentum, which sits on top of your intestine, and I was bleeding internally for several days. And
Right.
I passed out on Christmas Day, 1988, in Las Vegas. And, I found myself in the enviable position of being told by the emergency room nurse that they weren't sure that they could save my life, and that they were going to have to operate on me in 15 minutes. And, shit got very real very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, and you got to imagine, I gotta imagine. So you just had, breakthrough role, dream coming true, to a hospital where you might not make it. I mean, the highs and lows. I mean, not getting the part, then getting the part, then passing out in the middle of filming. I mean, you took a Christmas break.
Yeah. And, making it through the surgery was only the first hurdle. I woke up, I had a 15-inch scar or wound on my abdomen with staples. And, not too long after, I got a call from John Avildsen, who basically said, you got to come back by a certain amount of time, which I think was probably 2 weeks, or we're going to recast it. And, there were no balloons, no flowers, no, get well soon kid cards. And I got pissed off.
Yeah.
And
Well, welcome to Hollywood, kid.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, welcome to Hollywood, kid. And that internal anger and the sense of a lack of justice became my why. That's what fueled me to get back on that set and finish the movie. And I wound up doing all my own martial arts stunts in that film, having come back from emergency life-threatening surgery just about 2.5 weeks before.
Man, and you talk about in your book, you said that when you respond to life's challenges, there's a need for emotional discipline. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, there are times where, I worked my way all the way through law school. So I was working full time. I had kids, I was trying to get through all of that. I mean, working 40 hours a week, going to school at night. And there's just a time where you just got to find that extra gear and figure it out. How has emotional discipline helped you when you've had challenges in your life? This being a major one, but all of your challenges.
Well, emotional discipline is something that I've struggled with for many years. And, it hasn't really been until the last probably, 5 years or so that it's begun to come together for me. Emotional discipline is critical. We human beings really have no control over anything except for one thing. And if you think you're in control, all you have to do is go out tomorrow and take a look at the sun and realize that it's a dying star and that someday the earth is going to be consumed by a black hole. And that's going to be the end of everything, at least for us. We're not in control. The only thing that you're in control of is how you react to external stimuli. And one of the greatest encapsulations of that concept is Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Identity, who had the incredibly horrendous experience of being in a Nazi death camp. And he decided that he was going to live so that he could serve as a witness to tell the world what had happened. And that became his why. And that's how he managed all of his emotions, his fear, his anger, the loss, the humiliation, all of that. And that takes incredible emotional discipline. But emotional discipline, just like going to the gym and lifting weights, every time that you're able to exhibit emotional discipline, it becomes stronger. And it's something that, it's a progress, not perfection type thing. I mean, do I get days when I'm pissed off and throw something across the room? Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. But do I do it a lot less now than I used to? Yes. Am I more patient with myself and with other people? Because, I've gotten more attuned to being understanding and compassionate and less judgmental as I've gotten older. Yes. And all of that feeds into at least my ability to exercise, greater emotional self-discipline.
That's and one of the things I like that you said there was you've learned it in just the last 5 years. I mean, you're in your mid 50s. I'm in my early 40s. We're considered midlife, and we're still learning. We're still learning how to deal with this. And that's
Absolutely.
yeah. It's life is a lifelong journey in education, and
Yeah.
going back to
As it should be, though. I mean that's
yeah.
part of what makes life interesting is when you begin to figure a few things out about yourself or look at benchmarks in your life and go, wow, I just handled this situation so much better than I would have 10 years ago. And I'm proud of myself. That feels good. And part of getting older, one of the positive things about it is, if you do the work, if you become more self-aware, you become more comfortable in your skin. And, I wouldn't trade where I am now for my 20s. I don't think for anything, unless I could know what I know now, which is what everyone always says.
Right. 100%. So one of the things I love about Mike Barnes. I think Mike Barnes is the baddest of the villains. And the reason why I think that is because if you think about the other movies, both Johnny Lawrence and Chosen, Daniel beats them both fair and square. And the fact is if look, let's just call a spade a spade. Daniel wins because Terry Silver and John Kreese had this strategy. If they just let you go in there, you'd mop the floor with them.
Right.
And so, but in creating the character, did you create a backstory to explain how Mike Barnes became the karate bad boy in your own head?
I did. It's something that was in my head as opposed to anything that we saw. But in my head, I came down from presumably Northern California or Seattle, and in my head, my mother needed emergency surgery, and I had to get the money to get it for her. And I was going to do whatever I needed to do to get that money, and that it was not personal with Daniel, and that, under different circumstances, probably wouldn't have behaved that way. But, this was a business proposition for Mike to save somebody that he loved. It's imperative for an actor to always have a point of view, have a why, just like it is in life. The character was very unidimensional. I wish there was a scene, even if it was just a phone call, where we got a glimpse of, oh shit, that's why this guy's like this. That's what he's doing. I think it would have added a lot of depth to it. But in the absence of that, I just did the best that I could. You got to remember, I was a very, very new actor. That's why, a lot of people really kind of enjoyed what I did in season 5 of Cobra Kai. And I was like, well, yeah, I've done over 1,000 episodes of television. I've done 25 films. I mean, my depth as an actor has increased as has my depth as a man. And so that's all stuff that I'm able to bring to it now that I just didn't have back then to bring. What I did have was, an aggressive, in your face kind of, the guy that we saw. I suppose now, if I were to be transported back and play that character again, you would have seen a lot more, you would have seen different facets, different subtleties and colors and things like that. But it was a combination of, that's very much what they wanted, was they wanted this unidimensional thug, and that I was a very young actor, and what I know now is light years beyond what I knew then.
So that was one of the things I was going to ask, and I think you've kind of already answered it. Is I gotta imagine, first of all, I think I gotta imagine it's cool to revisit the very first major character role 35 years later as a seasoned actor.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've done, like you said, 1,000 television shows. You've been nominated for an Emmy.
No, I won. Hey, I won one.
Oh, you won an Emmy. There you go.
I won one.
You've done, you're a veteran actor now.
Yeah.
And so when you came back, well, first of all, how long have you been attached to the Cobra Kai project?
Well, I think I got a call like in July, and I think I got a call in July from the guys, and then I filmed in September, and then I went back in December.
So, first of all, were you just kind of, I mean, when you see Cobra Kai coming and you start seeing characters appear, are you starting to be like, oh, I hope I get the call? Or
I was very much, oh, I hope I get the call. I mean, I don't think it was any secret. I was pretty vocal about it. One of the reasons I was so vocal about it was I wanted to, instigate, an interest from the fans. I kind of wanted to do a grassroots thing where, I would have the fans clamoring for Barnes to come back too.
I got to tell you from a fan's perspective. So me and my buddy Tim, who we did another podcast, Saints on Cinema, and while we were doing that podcast, we actually went season 1. They did a deal where you could go watch the original Karate Kid movie, and then they played the first 2 episodes of the series. And I remember thinking, this sounded hokey at the beginning, because I just thought, okay, it's on YouTube Red. Obviously, nobody else wanted it otherwise.
Right.
And we went and saw the first 2 episodes, and I immediately started thinking, I was like, oh, they could do so much with this.
Right.
And at the end of the first season, when John Kreese came out, I remember specifically saying to my buddy Tim on our podcast, I remember saying to him, I hope they bring back Terry Silver and Mike Barnes. I was like, because they rounded out the Cobra Kai story. Each Karate Kid is kind of a story. You know, the first one is Daniel's story. The second one is Miyagi's story. The third one is John Kreese's story. And now we're getting Johnny Lawrence's story. And Terry Silver and Mike Barnes really rounded out John Kreese's story. And so I had been waiting for a few seasons for you to show up.
Yeah.
And so what's that?
You and me both.
Yeah, right. So when you got the call, did you get an opportunity to talk to John, Josh, and Hayden? I act as though I know them. I call them by their first names.
They're so gracious. I had a Zoom call with John and with Josh. Hayden couldn't make it, and it was amazing to think that these guys that are geniuses that created this show and they're having this, juggernaut success with it, wanted to take the time to talk to me. I mean, if they had just said to me, be in Atlanta on this date and you'll see what you're going to do when you get here, I would have been on a plane. But, we talked a lot about the character and, how it might fit in. And, they were gracious enough to listen to a couple ideas and things that I raised. And, the 2 big things for me were, one, wanted to show an evolution and growth in the character. I really wasn't interested in revisiting it as just kind of this unidimensional thug that he was in the films. Would I have done it? Yes, I would have done it. But, and I also wanted to make sure that where possible, we could insert some humor with Mike Barnes. And
there was a lot of it.
Yeah. And so it was great. They gave me some terrific moments to do some funny stuff. And, it was fantastic.
Well, it's great to hear that you got to have some input into where the character had been, because one of the things that I love about this is that they are clearly fans and they clearly thought about this a lot. There are so many throwbacks. And one of the things that I think is so beautiful about this series is how each one of those villains has a redemption story, and yours came through too. And so now another fan question that came through: which Cobra Kai actor was the best at karate and which was the worst at karate?
Oh, that's easy. The 2 best have got to be Sensei Ron Thomas, who plays Bobby, and probably Thomas. Thomas Ian Griffin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's legit black belt karate. Yeah.
So, but Billy and Ralph, I mean, they have worked, for years now. I mean, they're both very good. You can't do a lot of the stuff that they do without having some really, having some chops.
Yeah. So who was the worst?
I would like to just point out that Mike Barnes did land a couple punches on Chosen and also saved Johnny's life.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. So
for a guy that's been making furniture for a couple decades, seems like he still has it, right?
Yeah, yeah, he did. That would, for me as a fan, that was what I think was just so cool, was watching you fight Chosen. I'm like, we're seeing the villains from 2 and 3 fight each other right now. What is going on? And my favorite scene, I think I would say from this season, was outside the big limo, and the 4 of you are sitting there and all the villains want to go take out Terry, showing their villainous ways. And Daniel's there trying to talk everybody out of it. And you guys all take off to go after Terry Silver. And I was like, this is so awesome. One thing that I caught in there was there's a scene where Daniel says to Chosen and Johnny, they say, you guys are drunk. And by the look in his eyes, he's on something more. What do you think he was on?
Yeah. Oh, I think Mike might have taken part in a little bit of Peruvian marching powder.
There you go.
That's my guess.
What I thought.
That's what I was playing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I was kind of going for.
It came across. It came across well. You had that one good. So, what is your favorite? Your scene. I'm assuming you followed the series while it was going on. What is your favorite moment from this season and then the series in general?
Well, from this season, it was absolutely the same one that you picked, Outside the Limo. That was just, the four of us had never worked together. I'd never worked with Yuji or with Billy. Obviously, I had with Ralph, but we just all kind of fell into a groove. Do you know what I mean? It was like all four of us were kind of playing from the same sheet music, but each bringing something kind of different to it, and it was fantastic. I mean, it really was. It was really something special. What's my favorite moment from the entire series? Boy, that's a tough one. I mean, I really did like the scene with Chosen and Daniel in Okinawa when they're fighting, and Chosen's, you think he's going to go for blood, and you find out that's not the case, that he tweaks his nose, and I thought that was great.
Yeah,
and and I love that. I love the anachronistic moments with Johnny, because he's, and I can relate to this. He's still got one foot firmly planted in the '80s, which was the greatest decade ever. I'm just going to say.
Oh, and 100% agree. 100% agree.
Right. And so, I mean, when he's for everything from the music he listens to, and his political incorrectness and all of that. I love that stuff, and I just think, Billy just crushes it. I mean, Ralph crushes it too. You're seeing Daniel now is not a perfect guy, a flawed guy. And even though he's successful, he's just another one of us trying to figure it out. And I mean, that's the genius of the big three. And you had said that I had input on the backstory for Mike. I didn't really. I mean, I had given them some ideas, none of which they used. But I'm glad they didn't, because what they came up with was so much better. And these guys are really, from what I can tell, committed to never taking the easy way out by playing into cliches, or even more than that, really playing into what the audience thinks is going to happen. I mean, I had so many people speculate on how they thought Mike Barnes was going to come back onto the canvas, and none of them were right. I mean, who would have said, oh, he's a civilian now, he's a pretty good guy, and he makes furniture.
Right.
Wouldn't have been my first guess.
Right. Well, and what I love too is after their defeats, each one of the villains, after their defeats, there's a lot of self-reflection.
Yep.
And then they find balance and mentors, like, Mike Barnes' character found his father-in-law and learned furniture, similar to Mr. Miyagi. If I were to pick my favorite scene from the series, I think my favorite scene is, I think it's episode 8 of the first season, where Daniel and Johnny are sitting in the bar.
Yeah.
And you kind of realize Daniel and Johnny are the same character that just happened to have, Mr. Miyagi says in the first movie, he says, there's no such thing as a bad student, only a bad teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you see Daniel is just the same character that happened to go with Miyagi, and Johnny is the same character who went with John Kreese. And you see with Miguel and Robbie is what would have happened if Johnny had been with Miyagi, and Miguel is what would have happened if he went with Cobra Kai, and they all kind of intersect. And all of these characters get so much more depth, which is what I love about this. Is I think the best series from an old 80s show out there. Because of the care. You can tell. I've been very critical of Hollywood because I feel like they're just pillaging my childhood for financial gain. But what the big three, as you referred to them, have done with this is they've really shown a care and a love for a franchise and expanded it so well. And you get to be a part of that. Was there a moment where the four of you were just sitting there and you guys are just like, man, reminiscing on how crazy it must be to be, you all really kind of got your start in this?
Yeah, I had that moment. I didn't have it with all four of them because I hadn't worked with Yuji or with Billy. But, day one when I was down there with Ralph, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, wow. Yeah, the thing that was interesting about that too is, Ralph and I met each other at a point in my life when I was a young, brash 22-year-old kid. And
Mm,
they very much wanted to facilitate. Let's put it this way: the producers had no interest in facilitating a friendship between myself and Ralph. Let's put it that way,
mm.
and they were probably
Right.
very smart to do that. And now coming down to Ralph's show, it was wonderful to get to re-meet him as a guy in my 50s, as a guy who's a dad, like you know what I mean, as a guy that's
Mhm.
you know what I mean, and,
Yeah.
and we really connected, and he's a wonderful guy. He really is. He's he and Billy and Yuji, I mean, just so completely unfazed by their own success, very down to earth, very kind.
Mm.
Very. Billy's one of the funniest people I've ever met, bar none. Just makes me laugh. And Ralph is just a considerate, kind guy, and Yuji too. I'm very fortunate to know them, and I don't see them often, but once you're a part of the Karate Kid universe, it's like you're in an exclusive club, and you have this common denominator with the other members of the club. And although time and distance may separate you, when you get back together, um, you kind of pick up where you left off in a good way.
Yeah. All right. I have to ask you a question on this. I have my own opinion. So you mentioned the Karate Kid universe. Do you consider Hilary Swank's next Karate Kid as part of the universe?
Look, I mean, I not really. I mean, and
Thank
it's
you.
and it's and it's certainly no dig against her. I mean, I'm sure she doesn't really sit home and worry about what Sean Kanan thinks of her in Karate Kid 4. She's probably too busy polishing her Oscars. But
Right, right,
you know what I mean? I
right.
mean, she's
Yeah.
Hillary,
I,
a brilliant
I'm
actress.
telling you, I love Hilary Swank. She's a brilliant actor. She's done $1 Million Baby. It was so good. Everything that she's done is great. But next Karate Kid, I've heard the writers discuss that they do consider her to be a part of it. And I've said from the beginning, I'm like, oh man, please, everybody's good. We don't need her.
Right.
And and so now, um, so I gotta think, and I don't know if you can even comment on this, but I gotta think we got a final series or final season. I gotta think Mike Barnes is gonna come back. So
I sure hope so. I would love to go back and have some more fun with everyone, because it was one of the best work experiences I've ever had. It really was, and it was so much more than a work experience. Do you know what I mean? It really just, uh, even if for some reason I'm not asked to come back, I am just so humbled and so appreciative that I had the opportunity to do that. I mean, I would love to do it. I think who better than Mike Barnes, who was a national champion, to help prepare the kids for a worldwide tournament, because Mike knows tournaments and he knows how to
yeah,
win.
yeah,
So
he was. I mean, that was what he came in for, right? Is he was the tournament winner. He won
yeah,
all the tournaments. That's why he was in the
I,
magazine.
I
Yeah,
love, I've always had this kind of idea when I thought about it that, iron is strong, but iron is not as strong as steel, which uses different alloys to make it strong. And I kind of think of, Chosen and Johnny and Mike and Daniel, each as an alloy that brings something different to the mix. And,
right.
all together, their knowledge and experience would forge into steel, which would allow the kids hopefully to win. And I think that Mike certainly would have something special to bring to the table. But I
Yeah,
honestly don't know. I mean, they haven't even announced if season 6 is happening. I mean, we all hope it will, and our fingers are crossed. And yeah, boy, I sure would love to be a part of it if it does.
right. Oh man, I hope so. So a couple of other things that I just had questions on about the season, and then I want to talk to you more about your book and whatnot. But so there was a reference to Terry Silver's lawyer in the series. This lawyer who you gave him the number, which ultimately resulted in you getting your furniture store burned down. Um, but you didn't. There was no real follow up in the season about who this lawyer was, and obviously he must have contacted Terry Silver and let him know. Do you know if there was ever a plan to know more about that character at all, or if that will be
I don't,
visited?
I don't, but the way the guys weave the tapestry when they write, I would not be surprised at all if on some level that reappears one way or another.
Yeah, and that's what this season in particular, there were a couple of characters that I thought it was like, what was the point of that if that's not going to become a bigger thing? The attorney was the one, and then Miguel's father was the other one. And I go, they did that whole Mexico thing, and they just kind of dropped it from there. I got to think that that's coming back, and I hope it does because I found them both to be really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and we also don't know if we don't know. It's the question of does Mike Barnes actually have a claim to 50% of the Cobra Kai dojos? I mean, Mike's unemployed now. He's got himself a Rembrandt, and he's unemployed. And, who knows? This could be the catalyst that gets him back into martial arts, and he asserts his claim to Cobra Kai, and that's the fourth part of the the dojos that unify together. I don't know. I mean, listen, I'm extrapolating here. I'm not trying to put stuff. Listen, I'm sure the guys know exactly what they're doing, and it's going to be far better than anything I could come up with.
Man, so in your book, there's a couple other things that you talked about that I thought was really interesting, and I've known this to be true in my own life. You mentioned in the book, sometimes what initially seems like a negative ultimately turns into a positive.
Very much.
And I think for most of my failures, right, that has been the case. So I ask all the people who've come on here, what would you say is your biggest failure in life, and what have you learned from it?
Well, it's funny because, like you say, I can't think of any of my quote unquote failures that didn't wind up turning into a plus for me. I mean, I can tell you, my first marriage ended in divorce. I was crushed, and had that not happened, I never would have met my wife, Michelle, who's my soulmate. I struggled with drinking for a very long time. I quit drinking, and had I not dealt with a lot of that stuff and overcome it, I don't know that I would be as strong in some ways as I am. I mean, it was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. And now, I mean, like, do I regret the way I behaved sometimes? Sure, of course I do. Do I regret being hungover and blah 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 blah? Sure, but I don't regret the overarching lesson of knowing that I, at least for today, overcame something that was so perniciously sunk into the essence of who I am. And that's something I really talk about right in the introduction of Welcome to the Kumite. I talk a lot about the struggle that I had, and how I knew that if I was going to ever have any chance of not slipping into mediocrity, I had to slay that dragon. And in that respect, Welcome to the Kumite is probably a more personal and frank book even than Way of the Cobra. Look at what happened to me with almost dying. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but I wouldn't trade that experience, because I mean, that taught me a lot of lessons very, very quickly. It wasn't like, I didn't have the opportunity to decide if I wanted to learn them. I was going to be faced with them, and it was sink or swim.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Let me ask you a couple of questions on that. First of all, I think I've often said to people when I mentor them, uh, I do a lot of that with law students
Great.
and various people. I tell them, I go, sometimes you have to find that extra gear, and you're only going to find it when you absolutely need it. And it sounds like that's what you're saying, is that
Yeah.
you learned a lot of lessons that you just really weren't going to learn anywhere else,
Yeah.
quickly. And struggles do that for you. But how do you, so you've obviously been very successful. And I'm asking this as a father, because I've been successful as well. My kids grow up in a very different life than I
Yeah.
grew up.
Right.
How do you teach that to your kids?
Well, I think, one of the things I used to say to my child and to my 4 stepchildren, who I love very much,
Mhm.
once I reached a point in my life where I wasn't struggling constantly and was able to, provide some of the nicer things, I said, you guys need to all understand that the way you live your life right here under our roof is the result of, your mother and my working very, very hard for a long time. And you're not just going to go out in the world and replicate this lifestyle for yourself.
Mhm.
And I also try and really teach them to live in gratitude,
Mhm.
to be appreciative, to understand that things can be taken away. The one thing that can't be taken away is your character. Okay.
Mhm.
And um, I really try and instill in them the importance of compassion and realizing that, you know they, as have I, had the benefit of some really extraordinary privileges. I mean, I was thinking about this today. I was putting my political science hat on. I was watching something about geopolitical politics,
Mhm.
and there's this whole it's not an argument, but it's a point that is made that America in many ways is a nation blessed by God geographically. We have
Mhm.
2 oceans that basically protect us from ever being invaded by an oncoming navy, because we see them you know days away.
Sure.
We've got more natural gas and oil than any other nation on the planet. I mean, there's so much about the structure of this country that makes us so fortunate, and not to mention the fact that just being born in this time when we've got modern medicine and when we've got all the things that we have, where you don't have to go hunt and kill your food. You go down to the store, which in some respects may not be the best thing, but
Right.
there's a whole lot to be thankful for. And I think the other thing to teach the kids is you got to find that thing, that fire in your belly, that thing that makes you want to get up at like 5:30 in the morning without an alarm clock, because you can't wait to get into it for the day. And I'm lucky, I knew at a very young age that I wanted to act. um,
Mhm.
not everybody knows what their dharma is. What is that thing that they're meant to do that puts them in alignment with the universe? And I encourage them to find that thing that makes their heart sing, and then treat it seriously. It's like, if you want to be an actor, that's great, but it's not about wearing sunglasses and lying out by a swimming pool waiting for someone to discover you. It's like you better work your ass off learning the nuts and bolts of both the business and the technique required to become an actor of meaning, of gravitas, not just somebody that's in front of the camera. And I've worked really hard, because early on in my career, I was able to get roles based on kind of natural charisma and youthful good looks. And then at a certain point, the phone stopped ringing. And
Mhm.
I had to have a kind of, come to Jesus moment and go, you know what? I need to really learn how to act if I'm going to have any longevity in this business. And so I took a leap of faith, and I decided to do a play where I had to play, an English character with an accent, and really risked, putting myself out there and, got in acting class and did all the things that have brought me to the place where I am now, and treated it with the respect that it deserves. And that's something that no matter what you want to do, you have to prepare yourself for it. Or when you get the opportunity and you're not ready, boy, that's something that's soul crushing, because you did it to yourself.
Yeah, that's it. Everything you just said, I've in some way or another said it to my kids. I have a 16-year-old son, and like I said, I've had some success in my career, and I ended up purchasing a 2020 Shelby Cobra, which is my dream car, right? So I purchased it, and yeah, and he
Where did
goes,
you did you get it in California?
I did. I got it actually in Modesto. It's a funny story because it was right in the middle it was right at the beginning of COVID. It was perfect. The stars aligned because I had been trying to get one. I was on a wait list at another place, and I'm 6'7", so I had written the contract in a way I was, yeah, right. And so, yeah, so I wrote the contract. When I put my money down, I said, I need to make sure I fit in it. So I want it to be refundable if I don't fit in it. They're like, totally fine. We'd be able to find someone to sell it. This is pre-pandemic, right? So then the pandemic hits and they can't build them. But there was one in Modesto. So I drove to Modesto in the pandemic, and I sat down with them, and I sat in the car, and I was like, okay, I fit in it. And it's just jet black, beautiful.
Oh, that's
and he
badass,
goes,
man.
Yeah. And he goes, what do I got to do to get you in this car today? And I go, look, I've already got one on, I've got one on weight and all that stuff. I already put down a deposit. And he goes, we haven't sold a car all month. We are giving these away. And I got a smoking deal on that thing and drove it off the lot. And so, but and I ended up, because of the way I wrote the contract, attorney, right? I wrote the contract. I was able to get my money back from the other one. And so, but anyhow, my son looks at the car and he goes, I got to get me one of those. Right. And I told him, I go, listen, man, don't you forget that up until 2019, I was driving a 2012 Camry. I was like, what you are looking at is 20 years of bone curdling, blood curdling, soul crushing work that was up at 440.
Critical mass.
Right. I said, so when you see that,
yeah.
And I go, and that 20 years was real lonely. Nobody's cheering you on while you're doing that stuff. They all see the success.
I can't tell you how many times, and this isn't their fault, but it's, my parents, I'd come home and on a vacation or something, and I wasn't employed, and my dad would be like, still going to do this acting. It was the acting thing. It wasn't that I was, you know what I mean? And it was, people asking me all the time, hey, are you still even acting? And it wasn't until I hit a certain point, probably, as recently as maybe like four years ago or something, having been on, multiple soap operas for years, where, now it's kind of sunk in, I guess. You know what I mean?
So, right.
Yeah.
That's it. That's so funny. The other thing you said in your book that I wanted to touch on briefly, you mentioned in the introduction that there are two things you have to accept. And I love both of these. You say that you were born a winner, and that where you are is who you are. Why do you think those two things are so important to success?
Because the first thing that you must do is accept responsibility for your life. Your life is your fault. Okay. It is the sum total of all the decisions that you've made, both the good ones and the questionable ones, that has brought you to this moment. If you're not happy with your life, you know what? There's no one else to blame but yourself. It's not your overbearing mother's fault. It's, who's disappointed you're not a doctor. It's not your dad's fault. It's not your boss who's a jerk's fault. It's your fault. And I talk about it again in Welcome to the Kumite. Did you have some bad beats along the way? Sure. Are some people born with benefits that others aren't? Sure. But, I'll tell you about a woman who had the unlucky trifecta of being born into poverty, sexually abused, and not what people would really consider camera ready. And she grew up to have a multi-billion-dollar media company, and her name starts with an O. And, Oprah, of course. And so, Stephen Hawking, who has been crippled by ALS, is one of the most brilliant astrophysicists in the world. These are people that did not allow their obstacles to, define them. But you've got to accept responsibility before you're going to make any meaningful change. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you have to understand that the universe wants you to win. Okay. And how do I know this? Well, it's ingrained in our DNA. How do I know that? Because survival is ingrained in our DNA. For 200,000 years, we were not the apex predators. We were trying to run around in loincloths, not get eaten by saber-toothed tigers, and we're still here. Okay.
Right.
And survival is the very basis of success. You can't succeed if you're not around, right? So, how does a baby know not to breathe when its head goes underwater? We're hardwired to succeed. You just have to believe that. And once you start believing it, you get out from under this pervasive cancer that has affected our society of victimhood.
100%.
This crap of giving kids 9th place trophies and all that bullshit. We are not preparing our young kids to go into the real world, because I'll tell you what, there might not be any more winners and losers in elementary school, but that ain't the way the real world works.
Yeah.
And I even go on and Welcome to the Kumite. I do this chapter where I talk about lies that have been foisted upon us, and one of the biggest ones is that life is fair. I said, who the hell told you life is fair? Little kids get cancer. People that are assholes succeed wildly in life while good, decent people struggle. I mean, that's just the way it is. But you know what? You can't concern yourself with that. You just need to adhere to what I talk about in the book, maintaining your character, is searching for optimization, which is not always waiting for the perfect moment, but waiting for the optimal moment with what you have in front of you, and then pulling the trigger and acting decisively, seeking balance in your life, living with respect, both to yourself and other people, and recognizing this is a world of abundance. There is enough out there, enough love, enough money, enough everything for me to win and get mine, and for you to get yours too. And once you accept those things and start living that way and not living as a victim, the world opens up to you.
It's so interesting that you bring that up, because I can't agree more. There are so many people out there who, I mean,
Good.
I had just
buy my book.
Yeah, right. I'm going to. It's funny because I have, I had a woman on. It was funny because I just had a conversation with somebody who was saying that, you don't understand my childhood. You don't understand where I came from, blah, 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 blah. We all have that story. I had a woman on just 2 or 3 episodes ago, Ella Bogus, who, single mother who started law school with 2 kids and kicked out her drug addict now ex-husband, 2 weeks starting into law school and finished. And,
Amazing.
she had all the excuses in the world. Statistically, and no one, I've said this before, it's the moments when no one's watching, when everyone would understand why you quit, but you don't. Those are the difference between winning and losing.
I talk a lot about the necessity to be the hero in your own life. And that's not a new concept. It's not a concept that I've coined. But here's the thing, you got to look at your life like a film, and that you're the director, the producer, and the writer. Why the hell would you cast yourself as anything but the hero? Right. And a lot of people say, well, who am I to be a hero? And I talk about in Welcome to the Kumite. Let me tell you about a guy that started out as a comedian, pretending to be a president on TV. And then he became the president, democratically elected country. And then when his country was invaded by one of the most powerful armies in the world, he rose to be a hero. And of course, I'm talking about Vladimir Zelensky, and it's like, you never know when fate is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, the world needs you to be a hero, and you got to be ready to step up.
Yeah. 100%. Why do you think, in the last few moments we have, I want to be respectful of your time, but why do you think taking accountability for some people is so difficult?
I think there's a number of reasons. I think there's a small group of people that suffer from severe narcissism, and they somehow associate, they somehow just think that it impugns their self-image to admit culpability. I think that's one thing. I think another thing comes down to what I talk about stories. Somewhere along the way, you learned that saying I was wrong or this is my fault was somehow made you look weak. You know, if you're especially for guys. And that is a story that will keep you from succeeding. You know, I've got a lot of things that I need to, work on with my personality. But one thing that I think most people will agree that I do is when I make a mistake, I like to admit it. I like to apologize, and not that chicken shit apology. Like, I'm sorry if that made you feel badly. That's not an apology.
Right.
I'm sorry if you misinterpreted what I said. Okay.
Right.
And once you do that, most people in life are willing to move on. We all, especially as Americans, it's true that we like to knock people down, but we love to lift them back up from the ashes and watch them rise again like a phoenix. And if you just, it's kind of like that thing in politics. It's never the scandal that really gets you in trouble. It's the lying about the scandal that gets you in trouble, and if you just sort of fess up to yourself and go, you know what? I don't like living in this crummy apartment. I don't like the fact that I can't make my monthly nut and whatever it is. I don't like that I'm drinking too much, and go, you know what? I got myself here. And you know what? I'm going to get my ass out of this.
Yeah.
And then when you do it yourself, it means something.
Yeah. I think there's another component to this that is interesting. And that is, I know a lot of people who associate making bad choices with being a bad person. And so when they have to take account of bad choices, they feel like they're bad. And I tell people all the time, I go, listen, your choices aren't who you are. All you got to do is stop making the bad choices and you cease being the bad person. My dad is a great example of this. My dad really struggled. He has a bad backstory, but he's a hero because, despite his bad backstory and demons he had to fight, he kicked them about 20, 25 years ago. And that guy is a completely different person to my sister, who is now 19. We're 21 years apart.
Right.
He is the father that I always wanted him to be for me, for her. He is a completely different person. And he's no longer that person. And
Josh, let me ask you a question. Do you find it difficult? Like, do you find sometimes that you are resentful of the fact that he is that way with your sister and wasn't that way with you?
So I catch myself sometimes. Yes, I do.
But you catch yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what I was getting at was, I didn't imagine it's natural that you feel that way, but you also seem like an evolved enough cat to me that, you're probably happy that your sister gets that guy and that you can see the journey he made to get there. But what you also need to do is kind of recognize in yourself, hey, that's some self-awareness on my part, that I'm able to realize I missed out on that. And I would be very justified in being resentful and upset about that. You know what? But who the hell is that going to help? And not being that way. That's, good for you.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And, I want to be respectful for your time. We've gone, about an hour. I just want to say, when I picked up this book and I started reading it, as I think I mentioned at the beginning, I said, motivational book in Cobra Kai language. This is right up my alley. And I got to think Welcome to the Kumite is going to be right up there as well.
Yes,
if you get an opportunity to pick up either one of these, that's great. And Sean, I really appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Right, before I say goodbye, I have to tell you one thing. Okay, first of all, gratuitous plug. If you want the books, you can get them at wayofthecobra.com. You can get Way of the Cobra at Amazon. Welcome to the Kumite, only at wayofthecobra.com. What I was going to tell you was, believe it or not, you are not the tallest guy that interviewed me today. I had an ex-wrestler interview me today who was 6'10".
Well, I gotta tell you something. I am a current wrestler. I actually am an independent pro wrestler as well.
Get
So
out of here. Really?
yeah, here in Sacramento, I did. Okay, so real quick, I'll just tell the story. When I was 18 years old,
Yeah.
I had trained with some
Yeah.
guys here. I got a look. I didn't finish the training, but I was big enough that I could work it out. I got a look at a WWE developmental place, but I ended up going on a mission for my church. And so when I came back, I was like, the travel and all that, I didn't want to do it. But now my kids have heard all the stories. So actually, this last year, I've trained with Johnny Jeter, who's a former WWE wrestler, trained with him for a little while, got into it. And just this last Saturday, I had my second match back. And so
That's amazing. Do you ever get
yeah,
down to the LA area?
I haven't yet, but I'm looking to. I've actually got some feelers out. So if I do, I'll hit you up and see if we can
You
come check
gotta
it
let
out.
me know, man. I'm gonna come cheer. I
That'd be
would love
awesome.
that. All right, man. Hey,
Yeah.
listen, thank you so much, Josh. This was a pleasure. I want to wish you all the best, and I would absolutely love to do this again.
Awesome. Thank you,
Okay,
Sean.
buddy. Take
Appreciate
care.
it.
Okay.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.